Hello. Hello. We got everybody. Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere. This is Zach Couples with episode number 14. That's not 14. That's 5. But it made me think of Ace Ventura anyways. Episode 14 of the Movement Debrief, where today we are going to talk about Kinesiotape, amongst other taping modalities, managing performance programs. And you know what? If you beautiful people have any questions along the way, fire them off. Because this is going to be kind of a Q&A style type of ordeal, because both of the questions that I have today, or both of the topics I have today, I should say, involve questions from you wonderful people. But before we dive in or debrief, a little bit of housekeeping. Did you guys see my blogs today or this week? Notice I said blogs. That means plural. Blogs, yes. Very active this week. So blog numero uno, which was on my website, zachcouples.com, that was a live treatment where I treated my boy, Cody Benz, out of Drive 495, a phenomenal human being. He has the best lap in fitness. You'll have to ask him why he has that honor when you meet him. But we treated him. He was developing some neck pain while we were chilling in the Hamptons. You can't be hurting when you're in Hamptons, fam. So tried to help my guy out, and you guys can kind of see what my thought process looked like by going to my website. The second blog was on my boy, Mike Robertson's website, robertsontrainingsystems.com. I had the phenomenal opportunity to give him a guest post. And this time we talked about conditioning mistakes people make when they are training for basketball. And so I drew on some of my experiences in the NBA and the NBA D-League, and a lot of the stuff that I learned from my a couple of the assistant coaches that I worked with. And it was our collaborative effort where we got to take a strength coach's brain and the knowledge base that I had on energy systems and the game of basketball, and we applied those bases to what their basketball knowledge base was, which was incredibly huge. And I was very fortunate to work with Joe Boylan, who's a brilliant human being, Joe Bear, brilliant human being, Glenn Cyprian, Matt Woodley, and Bryson Williams, and there were many other people involved, Herman, Gabriel. All these guys really helped skyrocket my knowledge base in basketball, and the fact that we could collaborate together and get our guys exceedingly well conditioned was awesome. And so you can kind of learn a little bit about that this week. Sneak preview, guys. I'm posting for Mike Robb next week as well on Tuesday. I think he's releasing it. So please check out his website. First off, let me just talk about Mike Robb. When I was first getting into this field, whatever my field is, I don't know, and I was learning a lot from guys like Bill and guys like Mike and guys like Eric Cressy and Mike Reinold and all these people, because they were what got me interested in doing this, because I saw that these guys were thought leaders and were doing phenomenal things in the field. Not only that, but when I applied some of the principles that they were doing to my own training, whether it was me when I was running in college or just training in general just to get in good shape, Mike Robertson was one of those forefathers in that regard for me. And so the fact that he gave me the opportunity to write for his site, not once but twice, is just it's an incredible honor. So please go check him out. He's got, his squatting and deadlift posts are unparalleled, and much better than the deadlift posts that I put out. So check him out. He's at robertsontrainingsystems.com, and he owns, along with my daddy-o, Bill Hartman, IFAST, Indianapolis Fitness and Sports Training.com. So please go ahead and check him out. All right, that's it for housekeeping, I think. Yeah. Actually, one side note before we get in. So last week I talked about hip hop album of the week. So this debrief is brought to you by Twista. It's not really. He's not giving me any money. I wish he was though. But I listened to his new album. It's Crook County, which is hilarious because he is from Cook County in Chicago. I'm not from there, but I'm from Illinois, so I'll kind of rep it. But Crook County, like, I'm a huge fan of Twista because he be spitting way fast, and like, he kind of went with the album before. He kind of went a little bit to how they're rapping nowadays, which I'm not the biggest fan of. A little bit more trap music, and you know, he kind of lost his chopping capabilities, or at least he didn't exploit them. And with this new album, he still kind of keeps that new flair, but he gets back to chopping, and all is right in the world. It's a phenomenal listen. So Twista, Crook County, straight fire, great to live to. Oh my gosh. Anyways, so that's it for housekeeping. Let's dive in. First question is from my man listening on Facebook Live, Chris D. Thurlby, and he asked me this. He wanted to know everything that there was to know about Kinesiotape. So, are there any benefits? How would I use it? How would you apply it? And so, let's dive into that. So, I will tell you personally, I do use Kinesiotape a little bit. I use taping in general for a little bit. So, what we'll kind of do with this first portion of the debrief is we'll kind of talk about what the evidence says about kinesiotaping first, because that's predominantly what I researched, and then we'll kind of go into how I use it. And so if we first look at the evidence for Kinesiotape, it is all over the place. All over the place, because they're measuring a bazillion different things, and the research is really mixed at best, and at worst, not good. So let me just point out a couple studies. So, and I'll link these in the show notes on my website. So if you want to read these studies, I encourage you to do so. I just kind of did a brief scan of what was in ZachMed, which is all the research that I've compiled, and then PubMed to see what was new. And so I know a lot of people cite the 2014 systematic review where they looked at Kinesiotape across a bunch of studies. I think there were 14 RCTs in this one, or maybe it was 8. I can't remember. There was a lot. Decently quality studies too, and they looked at, is kinesiotaping helpful for pain? And that study said no, that this was no better than sham, which is just applying tape in just a liberal fashion, not having any rhyme or reason that maybe some of the individuals who teach courses on kinesiotaping teach. They showed that it was no better than a sham tape. So their conclusion was, this is a waste of time, don't do it. And I think a lot of individuals who poo-poo Kinesiotape hang their hat on this study as saying, oh, this is a waste of time, don't do that, blah, 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 blah. And so I think a lot of those people probably threw the baby out of the bathwater because they read that study, and then they probably never looked at any more studies after that. But if you had looked at this recent 2017 systematic review, where they looked at not just Kinesiotape, but taping in, I believe this was patellofemoral pain, or anterior knee pain, and they showed that this was actually a good adjunct, but not a good standalone treatment for pain, amongst other things. So we see that if we look at one person's systematic review, we might get a certain result, and then we look at another person's systematic review, we get a completely different result 3 years later, depending on how the research is studied. And that's just looking at pain. There's many other things that people have looked at. For example, there was one study that showed that kinesiotaping didn't help with pain necessarily, but it improved hamstring or straight leg raise flexibility. We're testing a lot more than hamstring. There's some that showed, what was the other one that I looked at? May be helpful for balance in individuals, like older individuals who have poor balance. That was another study that I came across. I know some individuals purport that kinesiotaping is useful for swelling. Not if you got a lateral ankle sprain. It didn't seem to be effective. And then what was another one that I saw? Yeah, so flexibility, balance. I mean, they're looking at this stuff for a lot of different things. But let's go with my favorite study, which was a 2002 study in Physical Therapy Journal. And basically, this wasn't kinesiotape, but this was just the patellar tape. And so, like, if you do the McConnell patellar taping, they'll have you look at the patella and move it this way and tape it this way, what have you. And what they did was they simply just threw tape over the patella. And they measured brainwave activity compared to no tape intervention whatsoever. And when they did this, there were significant alterations in brain activity in many of the motor areas, such as the basal ganglia as one piece. So I don't think we can say that this intervention, and I'm just going to say taping in general, is a waste of time. But I don't think we can say it's the panacea ever. I mean, it's clear that there's something going on with this stuff. And, well, if we look at that 2014 systematic review where they said that kinesiotaping was no better than sham taping, well, they still taped in that scenario. So it's clear that we can see that there has to be some merit in some individuals in some cases, or depending on what you're trying to achieve, that taping could potentially impact that favorably, or whatever it is you're trying to change. The question is, what is that, and is it relevant? And I think that's where you use relevant outcome measures and your testing algorithm and your assessment to determine when taping would be helpful and when it wouldn't be helpful. And for me, the way I use taping is, I would have to say, either in some individuals it seems to be beneficial for pain relief, and I can go into a little bit detail in terms of who that is, or if I'm trying to elicit some type of proprioceptive sensation. Like, for example, one tape job that I typically will do is if I need to get someone to get into a lunge position and I want them to be able to pronate their foot and then externally rotate their femur. So I don't know if you guys will be able to see that, but like, assume you can see my foot. But if I pronate the foot and then have them twist the knee back to center, sometimes if you throw a few tape strips that IR the tibia this way, that seems to be helpful at reinforcing that. So that might be an example when I would do a proprioceptive input kind of tape job. Another thing I might do, like when I know I mentioned using it for pain, seems to work fairly well in spinal conditions. So like I may do a couple strips of tape along the lower back, going from like the sides of the hips to the back, just to give an individual maybe who responds well to compression of the innominates. Seems to be a decent feedback mechanism to get that. I've also found it to be helpful in the neck. You know, if I have someone who's got a limitation in rotation or rotation hurts, sometimes like a quick test I'll do is I'll just put my hand along the neck, and if that helps, either changing motion or altering symptoms, I may just throw a strip of tape on there. I don't necessarily get fancy or sexy with it, because if we look at the research, it doesn't, at least I don't think we have to be necessarily protocol based with this taping. We have to just listen to what the patient responds to best. And sometimes if you do, you know, a manual intervention, and like, you know, this past week, for example, I did a Mulligan mobilization with movement, which is how he talks, where I just glided the wrist in a certain direction, and that seemed to improve wrist pain. And so what did I do? Well, I taped the wrist. I did that same glide, and then I taped the wrist in that position, in theory, to reinforce that sensory input. And so that's kind of how I use taping in general. And in terms of the tapes that I use, if I need to give someone a bit more reinforcement, so someone who I'm trying to alleviate pain with, as opposed to getting them to find and feel a particular sensation, like with the knee that I was talking about. I will use leukotape because it's a little bit sturdier, it's a little bit better at limiting motion, and it gives a little bit more sense of support. And so I typically start with that, and then I will wean someone off to a kinesiotape type thing because that does have a little bit more flexibility, but maybe I want to give them a bit more proprioceptive or position sense of where their extremity or their body is. I'll wean them to a type of kinesiotape, and kind of use, I know that like Spider Tech and Rock Tape and Kinesiotape are pretty popular. And again, I don't have any affiliate with who I like, but I got exposed to this dynamic tape stuff. Shit's fire, and it's tattoo colored, so like it seems to stick better than the other tapes that I've noticed. So like that's the kind that I go with, and it just seems to be a bit sturdier, and I can link that on the show notes as well. But that's dynamic tape. I'm going to rep that, and hopefully they give me money for supporting that. Just kidding. So I like that, but if you don't have that, I've used Rock Tape as well. It's pretty good. It doesn't seem to be as sticky as the dynamic tape. So, and you can't get it tattooed, I don't think. At least I haven't looked. So that's kind of my spiel on tape. So to summarize tape, it can be used for a multitude of factors. It's not a standalone treatment. The efficacy is questionable if we look at the research. I think we have to use an individual's response and outcome measure to determine when this would be an effective intervention and when it wouldn't. And in my personal experience, I don't think the specific tape job matters. It has to be whatever the patient or client responds to. And I like leukotape first, and then I will wean someone off to dynamic tape. There's kinesiotape for you. So that was question number 1. Thank you, Chris, for a wonderful question. Numero question 2. I don't know, whatever. This is from Brian. He emailed me this, and I'm going to read this off because it was very specific. So Brian asks, if you had the opportunity to be a program manager for a sports performance group, so this would be maybe like a team or a military setting, where I'm managing, say, an athletic trainer, physical therapist, strength coaches, sports psych, all of these things, how would I do that? How would I determine responsibilities along the performance and rehabilitation continuum? You're welcome, Chris. So that's Brian's question. So let me preface this. I've never been in this specific scenario. Well, I take that back. I kind of did some managing in the D-League, but it wasn't definitely a large setting like this. And I think what I can talk from is what I've read, one, in terms of leadership stuff, which I wish I would have read beforehand, but I will talk from this standpoint in terms of what I've seen work in pro sports, what I haven't seen work, probably more of that in pro sports, and what I think would be the best method of doing this. And so let's go with what doesn't work first off. Micromanaging in these scenarios. You have to let people do their jobs. And I think in order for people to successfully do their jobs, you have to put them in positions or roles in which they can be most successful. And that has to do with who you got. I mean, it's the same thing as if you're putting a team together, an athletic team. You know, when I worked with the Grizzlies, Mike Conley was doing certain things, Marc Gasol was doing certain things, Zebo was doing certain things. Like, they all had individual roles that they did in order for us to win games. And we did the same thing in the D-League. It's like, I remember Coach Wood, he gave all of these guys their specific roles that they were supposed to do. And so if you put people in positions to where they can be successful and maximize their strengths, and you don't micromanage them and let them take ownership of what they're doing and do their job, a lot of times that can be successful. So I know micromanaging doesn't work. I know that having an ego in this case, especially if you're the leader, doesn't work. And I've known this because I'm a recovering egomaniac, one, but I've also seen individuals where they have high egos, and a lot of times that gets in the way because you may not do what's best for the individuals that you're working with. Because I believe that this intervention is best, and maybe this other person believes this intervention is best, and the butting of heads does not help anyone, and most importantly, it hurts the individual you're working with. So you can't have an ego with these things. I think like those are like two of the big things that I would say you can't have when you're managing this scenario. And in terms of like the initial setup, like let's say like a team were to hire me and they said, Zach, you get to pick the squad, you get to pick how it's run, go. I don't know what the best way is to do that, because I've seen many different styles be effective. Because I thought initially if I were presented with this scenario, what you would need is you'd get a bunch of really good people who think like-minded and so on and so forth, and you just have them have their guys. And I don't know if that's the best way. I wonder, and the reason why I say that is because then like the players and the athletes, they don't necessarily know who to go to for what. That said, I think there is some benefit to role delineation as well, but one thing you have to consider is who you have. And if you are putting a team together, you probably should spend some money and make sure you get talent. Because, and I'll give you an example. The Golden State Warriors are really good. It doesn't hurt that they have 4 All-NBA players on their team. And a lot of times that can offset even the worst of processes. And so if I have a group of ATCs, PTs, strength coaches, and psychologists, and maybe other professionals who are not that great, but I try to keep them on and even try to put them in positions to be successful, you're only going to get so far. And so I think the first thing you have to have is talent and skill set and individuals who are willing to get after it and get better and get each other better and challenge each other. Like that has to be there, I think, in order for you to have a successful team. Once you have talent, then it's just a matter of knowing who you have and where they are most successful. And I think that if you think from that frame of mind, it makes it really challenging to say, well, the PT goes from here, and then now the strength coach takes over. But then if they get hurt, then we got to involve the ATC, and then the sports psych is somewhere in here. Like, I've seen physical therapists who are much better strength coaches than they are PTs, and I've seen strength coaches who do pretty damn well in the rehab cases. And I've seen some individuals who maybe are a physical therapist and a strength coach, but nutrition is their strong game. And so I don't think we can ever pigeonhole someone based on what their letters say they are. We have to know who we have and who we're dealing with and what that individual is best at, and put them in a scenario where they can do that and give them ownership of that scenario. So what I would say is that I would definitely make sure I get good people, great people who I can communicate with and trust. And they don't necessarily have to do what I do, but just good people who are willing to work hard and are good at what they do. And then making sure they are put into positions to be successful. And I think that's half the battle. What I also think, so like those would be kind of overarching themes. In terms of like specifics, I think it's very helpful to have someone who knows a lot about everything, but maybe isn't a specialist in anything, so a generalist. So like if you get an individual who comes to you and maybe they want performance to improve in category A, B, and C, but they have pain here and here, and oh yeah, they can't sleep, they're not sleeping, they're going through a divorce, and they get bloated every time they ingest carbohydrates. You need an individual, a pinpoint person who can go to that person, have that conversation, and know where to send off to your team. And I think that as a program manager, I think that's where a program manager is at his strongest point, is knowing their team and being able to have a legit conversation with whoever you're working with, and knowing who is going to be the best person to work with that individual. So I think if you have a team that's made up of like maybe a couple generalists and then several specialists who can intervene accordingly, that can be a very successful type of program, I think, where you don't have everyone who just kind of knows a little bit of everything. I think you do have to have some people who specialize in particular interventions, and maybe even the generalist can do that, but you definitely need someone who knows a lot about a little and knows who to send to when a problem comes up. I think another quality that the program manager in this scenario, if it were me, needs to have is being able to manage the people you're involved with. And I know if this was me, while I love working with patients and clients, with physical therapy, strength conditioning, nutrition, sleep, like all the things that I do, like I love that. And I could definitely see myself at some point maybe being one of those generalists. But if you're a leader, a lot of times you have to put that skill set aside and put on the hat of being a leader and a manager. And so in that case, it becomes less about the athletes and the clients and all that you're working with. And it becomes more about making sure that the people you are overseeing have the tools needed to be successful, make sure they can stay focused on their job and not have outside input. And, in some cases, this can be front office people, this can be coaching staff, this can be agents, this can be other stakeholders. Like, I think your job in that case is to push away the noise and deal with that yourself and deal with problems that might come up in this type of scenario where you have clinicians working with clients, and just being a resource and a guide for the individuals that you are overseeing to be successful. And a lot of times I think that's hard for a lot of individuals to do. I know that's hard for me to do. Like it would be very challenging for me to give up the clinical side because I enjoy it so much. But I think if I were to ever be in that program manager scenario, I would have to. And it's a noble pursuit to be in that position. It's a challenging pursuit because it requires a very different skill set. And I just think in order to be successful, you have to make sure you don't have an ego, that you have good people, you put them in positions to succeed, and you don't micromanage. And I think if you have those 4 qualities, you can have a pretty good program. Assuming your team's good. Because otherwise, if you have a bad team, it's really tough for even the best of performance teams to be successful. So, Brian, that's a phenomenal question. I think in general, as not just physical therapists, strength coaches, but just practitioners of all sorts, we have to go beyond scopes and beyond what our letters say, because I think we limit ourselves when we do that, because I think there's many individuals, there's many physicians who I know could probably be better strength coaches than a physical therapist who is a so-called movement expert. It's just we have to get beyond the letters and know what our skill set is and help people with that. And when we can't help people with that, know who to refer to. And I think in terms of the debrief for tonight, that's a good stopping point. Unless any of you lovely people have any questions you want to ask me, I'm going to just, anyone whatsoever. Otherwise, I'm going to go through my little monologue of where you can find me. No one? Okay. Well, if someone does have a question, I will answer it. But if you want to learn more, first off, go to my website, zachcouples.com. I write blogs weekly right now, as long as I can sustain that. And you guys can subscribe to my newsletter there, where you can get a free acute to chronic workload calculator. You can also get some podcasts that I've done, a free basketball conditioning program, a lot of cool stuff. And also, every Friday, I give y'all weekend learning goodies. If you want to be a part of the goodies, sign up for my newsletter at zachcouples.com. You can also follow me on, that's you guys, Facebook. My Facebook. Facebook.com/ZCouples. Find me there. You can also follow me on Twitter. Twitter.com, my handle is ZCouples. You can also hit me up on that Instagram, yo. Instagram, I am Zach, Z-A-C Couples, where I post quotes. I post my hiking pictures, a lot of other cool things. So thank you guys all for tuning in and listening. I thoroughly enjoy you guys coming here and listening to me and asking me phenomenal questions. Please, if you have any questions that you want answered on the debrief, go ahead and hit me up on any one of these mediums or shoot me an email, couplesperformance@gmail.com. Otherwise, stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving, keep it real, not to the extent where things go wrong, and I'll see you guys next week. Deuces.